And now, an XCW special presentation of Men of Honor Season 5.
Welcome to XCW's... He's watching porn here on Men of Honor.
Let's see it. Come on. Come on, hurry.
Alright. So we're here Alright, this episode of Men of Honor, we're going to be talking about sexual endos.
What?
No. We're going to be talking about something that didn't debut in XCW until 2013. We're going to be talking about steel cage matches. Yeah, buddy. This is one of my favorite concept matches we've ever had. Something that was talked about for a really long time, and it took us until the 10th anniversary of XCW to do so, but we finally got there. Talking about the steel cage matches, we're going to talk about the man who competed in the first steel cage match at XCW, Hazard. We're also going to have on our panel the man that was in the last cage match that's happened so far in XCW, Mr. Kevin Harris. A man who defeated Kevin Harris in that very cage match, Chris Jones. And a man who went against a very lucky manager in a cage, Corey Lee.
Yes.
Now we're going to talk about the steel cage matches and the variations of the steel cage match.
Okay.
But we can't go without talking about, first off, the very first cage match. James Cerebral versus Hazard. And can you refresh us a little bit of how this first cage match came about?
Me and James Cerebral were in the middle of a feud, and I had left because I had to have emergency surgery. And when I came back to promise, that I would be back, James Cerebral obviously came out and ran his mouth, and so I said, why not just finish it in a cage? So we got the cage, and it's very intimidating when you're the very first one to do something, because you're setting the standard. Alright, well, since Hazard's out there, he's a pretty big guy, being these three guys who are tiny. What can he do in that cage? What he can do, we can. We're smaller, we're going to be able to do a lot more.
There's been about 12 cage matches in the XCW since that. Do you think that since 2013, only being just 3 years now since the first cage match, do you think we're ever doing it on cage matches, or do you think that the cage match keeps reinventing itself?
The way we keep reusing the cage, whether it be, as we've said, like the Side of Madness.
Right.
That brings a whole new twist to the cage part. Then there's people, like Corey Lee and You know, Matt Chinchell wrestled in a boot in a cage.
It's Brandon Hobbs, yep.
But, like, just the way people utilize the cage is different. And the way the people that are in there, Chris Jones, Corey Lee being in there, you know, and those two, just the way it's used.
Now, let's give, especially the two of you who were around at the time during the first one, what can you recall from the first cage match? Did you think, man, this is something that I hope that I could be a part of, or it wasn't what you expected? What did you want out of the cage match? What did you think following Hazard and James Cerebral?
Well, personally, after the match, I obviously knew that I wanted a match in a cage, which I eventually got a match in a cage. But I thought the match was it was a good match, set the standard for a steel cage match. It was a bit of a rough match, but a good match from both James Cerebral and Hazard in the steel cage to start off a match type like that for our show for the first time.
Another cage match that we had, it was our second cage match in XCW history. It took a drastic twist, though. The match seen Austin Chaos face off against me in a barbed wire steel cage match. Now, all of you guys have been in a cage match, but none of you have been in a barbed wire steel cage match. And how do you think that plays differently than the normal cage matches that you've been a part of?
Not only just a cage in general by itself can be used as a serious weapon. I mean, I picked Kevin Harris up, catapult him in the cage, he slingshot him in the cage. You add the factor of the barbed wire being wrapped around the cage. It's another thing you got to plan around. How to utilize that to your advantage. I would definitely be using the barbed wire to beat the shit out of my opponent with.
And that's exactly what I tried to do in a match with Austin. However, I come up short when Gabe got heavily involved in the match, threw the barbed wire bat over the cage, and eventually cost me the championship, which was Austin's first XCW title. So, in a way, that cage match kind of made Austin's career.
I mean, I will say this, though, whether it's a barbed wire steel cage match, a regular steel cage match, it's not like a regular match. So you make one wrong move in that cage and it's over.
Right.
And you said something like it catapulted Austin Chaos' career. You think to this amount of time that Kevin Harris has been out of the tag team division, what's his first standout thing you can really remember, really big thing?
Right.
I think the cage match is helping catapult Kevin Harris and give him that confidence to step out there and try stuff.
Here's something I'm going to talk about. We've seen two masked characters that I could recall. Two masked characters compete in cage matches. One was LOL, the other being the Joker. Does that play a disadvantage because they're not getting all the, they're not getting perfect sight inside the cage, in a cage where you need to know your surroundings? So does it play against them in that case? Or is it play in their favor because when they hit the cage, it's not hitting them directly? Are they at an advantage or a disadvantage in that type of match?
I think it levels out for the fact, one, they don't have full awareness of their surroundings because they can't see. The peripheral vision is completely gone most of the time. However, with that cushioning that they have from their mask, it also gives them a little bit of advantage because it's harder for them to bleed. And the match that me and Chris was in, both of us was bleeding, and that stuff was getting in our eyes. And for me, mixed with the rain, it was, running and making it really hard to see.
Let's see,
So-
who did...
It also depends on the type of mask too. You gotta think. Some masks cover the whole mask character's
Right.
face.
Like Joker. Who
Yeah.
did Joker face in his
He
cage match?
faced LOL. It was at the night show. Remember, it came out as the Wyatt family.
Right.
And then you gotta think when LOL faced the
No, it wasn't the Wyatt family. It was under Joker.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
I'd have to say that for somebody like LOL, he's an advantage. He's a cruiserweight.
Right.
He can use the cage. to
He
his
even
advantage.
walked across the top
Yeah.
of the cage in his.
For
He
somebody
gave-
like
gave
Joker,
Matt Chinchell the Hurricane.
Right.
for somebody like Joker, it's not going to benefit him a whole lot because he has a bit of an unorthodox style, and
Right.
I mean he's not the greatest wrestler in XCW. I mean he goes
Right.
out there and gets stuff done, but I mean if you put somebody in there who's used the cage often or knows how to use the cage properly, they're gonna beat somebody like Joker.
Now, the cage provides, we all know this from experience, especially guys like me and Hazard, the cage doesn't leave you much room. It's more of a confined space than we're used to working with. And that you would think would make more brutal match because it's going to be a lot more ground and pound or, using the cage style. But a match of the year and candidate and winner came from a cage match. That was just a random thrown together match at a night of reckoning, as a matter of fact. We're talking about Corey Lee and Brandon Hobbs, and you won that match. What makes a cage match so special that it could even stand out as a match of the year? Because, in that much of a confined space, that's got to be hard to pull off.
Being in such an enclosed space also can affect some people's movesets, whereas Hazard likes to get the engine running when he comes in for that clothesline from L. Hazard would prefer to have the engine running when he hits you for that pounce.
Right.
It depends on the moveset. You being in a cage, whereas superstars are usually running at you when they take your new finisher, I think it nulls the impact of that type of move, whereas someone like Kevin Harris, you're in closed space, I think it's easier to get a curb stomp, easier for FML, easier for a super kick.
Going off of that, though, there is a disadvantage with that, with the moves that require more space. But there's also an advantage in a cage match when you have moves like my curb stomp, for example, where you can actually use the cage itself to get more power for that move as you experienced.
Here's something else to think about. Are cage matches too easy in a sense of, yes, you can defeat your opponent by pinning them like in any other match. However, you can also use escaping the cage as another method to win the match. For example, Ox Cannon did the backflip off the cage to escape in his cage match. And as acrobatic and as gifted, as Ox Cannon was, let's put it bluntly, no one has had a better looking moonsault other than Billy Nova in XCW than Ox Cannon. An Ox Cannon flawlessly backflipped off the cage, out of the ring. That doesn't necessarily mean that, his win was because he was the better man or the better wrestler in that situation. He was just the one that got to the cage quicker and backflipped to the ground.
It could be the downfall. Like when LOL.
Who was that match against? James Cerebral?
Yeah. When LOL wrestled Matt Chinchell, Matt was sitting up in that corner of the cage. When LOL got up and tried to run across, what would happen if Matt Chinchell would have fell backwards out and hit the ground?
Right. And the same could be said in Hazard versus LOL. LOL did the miss to Hazard's face. Hazard couldn't see, did the uppercut to LOL. LOL fell out of the cage, thus making LOL win the match. Kind of an unfair advantage to Hazard, to be honest. Had LOL had to pin Hazard in that cage match, would it have had the same outcome?
I don't believe so. No, I believe Hazard would have won that match. I believe the point of some people escaping the cage the way they do sometimes, it adds a little bit of insult to injury, having your opponent escape the cage like that over you.
In the way that match ended, added a lot of insult to Hazard.
Right. Even to the point where Hazard went ballistic at the end and beat the living piss out of LL.
He hanged him.
Yeah.
It's like he was playing Hangman.
Here's another interesting match. Brandon Hardcore Hobbs defeated Matt Chinchell for Matt's first XCW championship in a cage match. Matt Chinchell wrestled that match in a walking boot with a broken foot. Okay? And we know how hard it is to maneuver in the cage. Matt Chinchell was even doing splashes and stuff off the top of the cage in a boot. Could you imagine?
Didn't we consider that match even match of the year?
Yeah.
Cage match has been in match of the year a couple times. So far, the only one that's won it is mine and Brandon's match.
Right. Could you imagine what Matt went through in that walking boot after being jumped by EBW? And that was a huge turning point in Brandon Hobbs' career as well, because not only did he win the XCW Championship once again, he was a member of EBW and was jumped by EBW following the match. We also had Matt Chinchell and Fletch compete in a new variation of the cage match. And that began at SummerMania 10. And we're talking about the Side of Madness. Now, we've already seen now a regular cage match, a barbed wire steel cage match. Now there's this brand new variation, where you begin in a cage. Once you escape the cage, it becomes a ladder match. Isn't that just brutal?
It's taking two match concepts that absolutely lives on destruction, putting them together, and it's complete chaos.
It's the type of match where you have to really change the game plan after you get out of the cage. You can't go about the same plan you had while you were in the cage. Now you have a ladder involved. You have to climb the ladder, get whatever you're going to have, title, briefcase, no matter what it is.
And I remember that wasn't a very good match. But given the weather and the hectic day that we had that day, I mean, it was like, what, 110 that day?
Was it SummerMania?
SummerMania, yeah. SummerMania 10. But not a very good way to jumpstart this style of match. Do you think that it's going to stand the test of time as one of those match concepts that may stick around? Or is it going to fade out like the Six-Man Mayhem or the Super Elimination X that you never see again?
I think it depends on what superstars are in the future cage matches, how they turn out. If you, not saying that they would per se be in there, but if you throw someone like Void against Billy Nova in a cage match, the match doesn't work out, that's one bad cage match. The next show you throw like me and Ryan Grayson in a cage match, for example. If we have a bad match, that's 2 cage matches in a row. Normally, if something is pretty bad, we normally don't do that anymore.
Like Sin Series?
It really just depends on the outcome and how well it works.
Well, it definitely didn't work with myself and Matt in the first one. But it's not the end of the Side of Madness. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. Next up, interesting match that came about. Die Hard Corey Lee versus The Game. Now, the thing we find funny about this match is that EBW couldn't get into the cage, but Austin Chaos could.
Really easily.
He's a sneaky little bastard.
Yeah. Is there anything that we could even recall from this match? other than poor Gabe.
I beat the shit out of Gabe. That's
Hey,
what I did.
you know what?
I
I'll give it
fucked
to
him
Gabe.
He's undefeated.
He went out there
He won.
He did.
and
Cheating bastards.
took everything Corey Lee had.
I beat the shit
For
out of him.
being an announcer.
Right. Now, we talked about how we feel like the cage match continues to evolve, and that could be by its ever-changing, things. The Side of Madness changed the perception of the cage match. The barbed wire cage match changed the perception. Now, what's something that no one has ever done before? And you know how we are in XCW. We want to do something no one's ever done before. And in 2015, we did, or actually 2014, we did just that. Genocide faced Chris Jones in a first ever, only ever, last man standing steel cage match. Is that okay? Now here's the thing. That takes away the aspect of what we were talking about earlier, how you could escape a cage and it'd be easier. In a last man standing match, you have to incapacitate your opponent to a 10 count. Now escaping the cage doesn't matter. What does that do to a cage match?
Well, it
And
allows
you were a
to-
part of it.
Well, it obviously is going to allow you to use the cage more effectively and more as a weapon to keep your opponent incapacitated.
Right.
That's what you really want to do in that kind of situation, is use the cage to your full advantage.
And you got to think, the cage wasn't the only weapon used in that match. I believe there was a sign and a steel chair also in that match. And earlier we talked about, matches defining people, like the ladder match defining me,
Right.
UPC and such. That match kind of defined the ending of the Chris Jones Genocide feud per se, with everything that we've done, how we've made it really personal with each other, and then for it to be a last man standing steel cage match was a good way to end a feud.
What do you think is the most devastating cage match? Side of Madness, the barbed wire steel cage, or the last man standing?
I want to go with the last man standing, just because, for one, there's really no escape, so that's thrown out the door. You can get out the cage and the match is still going, so you're still going to get your ass beat. None of that. That cage sets up a perimeter of how far you can run from your opponent. So whether you're at one side of the cage or not, you're still going to get caught and most likely get your ass beat. Or get zip tied to a fucking cage. Asshole. But, the last man standing cage match, not only do you have the cage, but you also have, as Jones said, all these weapons that were in play in this, and
Right.
closed into this perimeter, per se, that you're just getting your ass beat with.
If I'd have to go with one that's probably the more dangerous one, I'd go with the barbed wire one.
Right.
Because, if you can get thrown into that, you can get caught in that. You ain't going anywhere. Your opponent could easily just leave then.
What about a barbed wire last man standing steel cage?
That would be rough.
Well,
That'd probably
that
be
would
the
be...
roughest one we've done. If we do that. Yeah. Maybe that.
He just thought of that, and it's going to be used eventually.
It's a good idea.
Maybe.
I like
No,
it.
it's going to be used
It's gonna
eventually. It'll end up being yours and Ryan Grayson's final match.
It could be.
Okay.
It could be a barbed wire steel cage, Sides of Madness.
Oof.
God damn.
And then after you get the belt, you gotta knock your opponent out for a 10 count or something.
Another cage match I can think about. These are two brutal guys. Anyway, Brandon Hobbs and Carnage had a steel cage match for the International Championship in 2015.
Omega Driver on the ground's lock.
This,
Right?
Yeah,
This would
that's all I
probably be-
remember, but it was nasty.
yeah, this would probably be the nastiest cage match I've seen. They did some really rough stuff in that match. You honestly,
They're rough anyway.
I know, you got Brandon Hobbs in there, and then Carnage, as the years gone by, he's just got stupider and stupider. He just does more stupid stuff. He will take anything. You want a frying pan to his face, he'll take it. You want to
He'll get up and laugh about it.
Yeah, he will. Hot out.
He'll lay down there and twitch, but he'll get up and laugh at you.
He will.
And then when you present him with an award for having such a good match, he'll cry.
He is like a
All
new Vapor.
emotions.
He's like a
All
new Vapor,
emotions.
but not. He's the new Vapor.
But after
not
Brandon
taking
Hobbs
dildos.
hits him with that frying pan, Brandon Hobbs is going to lay down there and gag because
He's gonna have
he's
that.
hurt himself.
He's gonna have that smoker cough too. That real bad smoker cough. You can't forget that.
Sounded like a
Corey Lee went against Ryan Grayson in the second Side of Madness to become Mr. Summermania this year. Was that a little more successful than Fletch and Matt Chinchell? Did it save this match concept?
It's like I said in the very beginning. The first cage match is set in stone. The first Side of Madness is set in stone. All right. Well, where you and Matt were trying to put the ladder into the cage, they knew from that experience, hey, we can't do that.
Right.
So they have to come up with something different. So whatever you guys couldn't do, they knew they couldn't do that. So they knew that they had to tweak what they were doing. And nothing to get, like, you and Matt could go out there and wrestle paper bags and it looked good. You guys just couldn't work together because almost every match you guys had was
our stretcher match wasn't that bad.
No, it wasn't. But it's like you got to put you guys together, and you guys had good promos and everything. Just the matches were not.
It's like you guys couldn't be in sync together. It's like you were slightly off.
And that one time that you guys were in sync was that stretcher match. There's plenty of other superstars out there that were like that too.
Right.
But like I was saying, that first Side of Madness match set the tone.
The last case.
And now that we had the second one,
right.
Say you put another match of Side of Madness together, they could build off of Corey Lee and Ryan Grayson and make it better. It's just a building process. That's all they are.
I think it's a match that'll probably stick around for a while. It just, I mean, the first one wasn't that great, but that doesn't mean that it has to fade away because the second one wasn't bad.
Does that mean the 6-Man of Mayhem and Super Elimination X will be back eventually?
They could. I think if you put the
Super Elimination X is a good concept that had a shit ending.
I don't really remember Super Elimination X.
The reason why
it was we had a Super Elimination X is because you won the title and then didn't come back the following show, and then later came back as a co-GM, so the belt was vacated.
You gotta think.
Super Elimination X is 10 men start. It goes down. There's eliminations. Once it gets down to what, 5 or 4, something like that. It changes into different match concepts.
Starts out as like a battle royal,
and then like a flaming table, and then like it goes into different variations of matches until there's a final. It's almost like a 5 stage or 6 stages of hell. Almost.
It sounds like an interesting match. I'm surprised it hasn't been back.
I think the only problem with it was because it was called Super Elimination X and people made fun of the name.
Super Elimination X. What are the abbreviations for Super Elimination X?
Sex.
I think if we changed the name slightly, it wouldn't be that bad, but I think it's a great concept.
Well, what happened was is James Cerebral got hurt.
And it screwed the finish.
But that's nothing new, though.
That's what happened, though, is James Cerebral got hurt.
George Floyd.
Yep, and he freaked out.
Yeah.
And he left, and that left Austin Chaos have to take the other finish.
And
that Austin was not comfortable with doing with at the time.
Right.
Because obviously he takes the flaming table now. He took one straight to the arm.
I think it helps. I was like, come on, you can get out there. You can do this. You can do it all.
So I think if it was brought back and it had the right people, I think it would be a lot better. But
10 people is a lot of people to be in one match, though.
I want to see it.
Dorgon was even in that one. The first one.
I mean, 2016. I want to see a Super.
It doesn't have to be 10 people. We can cut down.
Well, Super Elimination X. The part of the X is the fact that it's 10. That's the 10 part.
I mean, you could just call it Extreme Elimination X instead of with the S. I mean,
I want to see it.
The last cage match that happened in XCW was a match between Chris Jones and Kevin Harris. Now, this is a chance where you see Chris, who's been in these these cage match situations before, and knows how to work his way around different variation matches, going against someone who is still fresh to the XCW and has never been in this style of match before. And we talked about how the ladder match keeps reinventing itself, and I think this was another one of those cases. There was no barbed wire. There was no last man standing rule. This was a straight-up cage match, just like you've seen with Corey and Gabe, or, LOL Matt Chinchell, or Hazard and James Cerebral. This was the same type of basic cage match, but it was the way that they used the cage that made it new and stand out. And the thing that stands out to me is the fact that they did it in the rain, for one, which is amazing. 2, the frog splash, and 3, the curb stomp.
This is the second cage match that had extreme potential to be another match of the year.
Right.
This is probably the second cage match after me and Brandon that really set the tone for the cage.
And I don't even think it was just a cage match. Like, the way the storylines and the way he left the royalty, and I think it was a fight.
That's
Not
right.
just a cage match, because if you watch the match, the cage breaks. Any one of us could have fucking stumbled out the side, but no, instead of going to win the match, we beat the shit out of each other.
I could have easily got out the cage when I went for that curve stomp, but instead I went for the curve stomp and tried to end Chris Jones. But
And then we both busted each other open. I catapulted him into the cage. He gave me a slingshot into the cage. And then not only, after the cage match was over, still utilized the cage match, like you mentioned, with zip ties, zip tie him to the cage, and beat him with his own bat.
What variation of a cage match do you want to see in XCW? I mean, think about it. There's never been another company anywhere
Triple threat.
that has ever done.
I want to see a flaming table cage match.
No company ever has done a last man standing cage match.
We could
I want to see a triple threat cage match.
make the cage bigger, have a tag match in the cage.
Yeah.
A triple threat cage match. I want to see it. I want to see Chris Jones. I want to see Corey Lee. I'm going to go out on a limb. I want to see Kevin Harris, Chris Jones, and Corey Lee in a triple threat cage match.
I like that idea.
Or you just put a cage around JJ and Hazard when they start arguing about who's going to win the match.
This sounds good. I like this. Let's let this
I
happen.
like that idea a lot.
Because you got to think,
World champion, extreme champion, and new age champion on
none
the
of
same
us,
match.
none of the three of us right now are characters. We don't like each other.
I don't like a lot of people.
It would escalate. it could escalate into what I said with the me and Kevin Harris. It could escalate
Here's what I
to the
think.
fight cage match.
Chris Jones beats Brandon Hobbs at Hellbound. Chris gets 5 minutes alone with Jericho in a cage.
The bad thing is I think
Right.
Jericho would win.
Right in the stories.
Jericho would win, I think.
Possibly.
Cage
Cage has been used in a different variation too. James Gerke wrestled Psycho Circus Clown with the Eternal Darkness locked in a cage.
And then didn't Psycho Circus Clown hide in a cage?
Wasn't that during the King of Mountain?
Mm-hmm.
The penalty box cage.
That's sneaky fucker.
He was being smart.
What about you? What variation of the cage do you want to see?
As hard as it would be, I'd like to see Cell.
With a top.
I agree with that.
Or
Genocide's definitely.
there's already been
on that.
talks of possibly maybe a 6-side. I would not be mad about that.
That's coming in 2016.
I would definitely not be mad about that.
Well, there's our surroundings for that triple threat cage match.
6 times the steel is coming.
You can make it happen.
Did you just have a lisp?
I don't think so.
It's coming.
It's coming.
It's coming.
I just Mike Tyson'd it. Well, I'm just gonna grab my blocks and take a shit, okay?
What do you want to see?
The 6 sides of steel, like I said,
You got tears.
is in the plans. That's already in the works of something that we are going to do. But I want to see, I'm not sure what I want to see. I do want to see something with a top.
I prefer topless.
What about Ultimate X with the cage?
That could happen. I don't know if that cage is very.
We're gonna have to reinforce the cage a bit. I think we should get some stuff to probably reinforce the cage.
We could even do something like a cage match where something's on a pole in the corner of the cage.
Viagra on a pole?
Condom.
Yeah,
We could even do a variation of a Texas Blower Open side of a
Without Ryan Grayson?
of a cage. Oh, no, maybe Ryan Grayson in it.
Are you sure?
No.
Okay.
What about we'll take like the variation of the Clockwork House of Fun where the cage match has the weapons inside the cage already strapped, and you're stuck inside the cage with those weapons.
I feel like you're just trying to kill somebody.
I feel it'd be a really good concept as long as it was a 6-sided steel one. That way it was a bigger area.
Yeah.
Right.
But I feel that'd be...
And Brandon Hobbs ain't in it.
Yeah, as long as Brandon's not in it, because he'll kill somebody.
A lot of stuff might get cluttered.
Yeah. I'd like to see a cage match with more than one mat. That'd be great.
You're gonna have...
The next time we're going to be here for XCW's Men of Honor, we're going to be talking about entrance theme music. There's been a lot of those.
Prepare for 5 hours of talk.
That's just Chris and Brandon by themselves.
You've had just as much.
No, I haven't. Have I had as many as Chris and Brandon?
You've had a lot.
Until next time, from Kevin Harris, clearly Chris Jones, and Kenny Chaos on Fletch. See you next time right here